awesome morning, wonderful afternoon, and fantastic evening. This is Carla from the Learn English by Speaking English show. And no, I'm getting my shows confused. Today is MindPlore with Carla and Friends. Please excuse that. I just realized what I said. I don't have the normal crew that I have for the English show. And I'm looking at them now and I'm like, I made a mistake. But that's what life is about. We grow and we learn from our mistakes. And sometimes we start talking about these mistakes and saying, boy, I made a bad mistake. And we get so stuck in it that we don't take a moment to take a deep breath, relax, and become aware of who we really are. Mistakes are a part of life. Mistakes happen because we're out in the world and we're listening to the noise of the world. But when we go inside and we're listening to who we are, silence takes over and we begin to align with what we need to do. And today, that's what we're talking about, alignment with ourselves. I think we named it a little easier than that, but that's basically what we're talking about. And having said that, Pastor Billy is supposedly coming, but he's having some issues with Zoom or technical issues. Oh, here he is. He is here, but he needs to change his name to his Facebook name in case people want to find him. And if he just puts it in the chat, I will do it for him. Pastor Billy, change your name to your Facebook name. I think it's William PB Devlin. Do you know how to change it?
Yes.
Great. So we have the whole crew here now. And it definitely isn't the English show. It's MindPlore. I have Shivali here. I have Jeanne Alford, who hasn't been here for a while, but will be here pretty regularly for a little while. And I have Pastor Billy. And as I said, mistakes happen. But take a moment instead of worrying about your mistakes and going back into yourself and becoming yourself. Jeanne, while I do something, I'm going to ask you to take over.
Okay. Well, I did my homework and I found some interesting quotes that I'd like to share to kind of color our conversation. One comes from the great Wayne Dyer. Make peace with silence and remind yourself that it is in this space that you'll come to remember your spirit. When you're able to transcend an aversion to silence, you'll also transcend many other miseries. And the psychiatrist and writer Elizabeth Kubler-Ross writes, learn to get in touch with the silence within yourself and know that everything in this life has a purpose. Deepak Chopra shared that silence is the great teacher, and to learn its lessons, you must pay attention to it. There is no substitute for the creative inspiration, knowledge, and stability that come from knowing how to contact your core inner silence. I love that. And then,
you know what's interesting that you mentioned Deepak. At one point, I actually knew him, and he had given me some instructions. But I met him first when I was in silence with Maharishi for a week. Go on.
Yeah, well, I have one more to share, and that goes back in philosophy to Rumi. Listen to silence. It has so much to say. And when we were talking about the theme for this week, Carla and I were talking about how noisy and chaotic the world is, and what is it that we need to do to remain true to who we are and what we're doing and what our purpose is. And we started talking about silence and how difficult it is to harness this great power we call silence. It balances us. I keep waiting when I'm sitting in meditation. I want a voice to come and say, listen to what I say. But that's not what you get when you're sitting in silence. You actually get feelings, emotions, thoughts, and you get that chance to kind of file through them and see what you need to hold and what you need to release. And that's extremely powerful. And as Deepak says, getting in contact with your core inner silence, you're there when you feel that deep, deep, deep sense of peace. And you just go, ah. And it helps in managing all the chaos that we face every day. The world is just getting louder. Well, at least we're more aware of it being louder. I think 30 years ago, before social media, at least we could, watch 30 minutes of news and then, go back to our lives and figure out who we are in this world. But now we just get yelled at 24/7, whether it's the 24-hour news channels, the social media, or, ourselves, just continually chaotic. So that's kind of why I picked these. Silence is a great teacher, and silence is a great balancer, if you will. Shivali, how does that ring with you?
Actually, you've said a lot. So I was just listening very carefully. And what came to my mind is that, what you mentioned, Deepak, that getting in touch with your inner self, hearing that inner voice. And for me, that inner voice is not just a silent voice, it's the voice of my conscience. What is my conscience telling me? And there I think on a number of occasions that inner voice is the voice of conscience, the divine conscience, which is coming from a very different realm. And it is this voice which we often tend to silence in the cacophony that we hear outside. So if we could learn how to harness this inner voice, we could take action also. Because silence should not be, for me, silence can be seen on different levels. So if I have connected with my inner self, I have deeply connected with my inner core, my divine consciousness, then surely what I witness outside, I need to voice certain things also. This is for the sake of justice. And here I'm very happy to see Reverend today present, because I've been watching him on Facebook, and truly, he's, that this is the inner voice, the inner call, being the messenger, the emissary of Jesus, as he calls himself. That's his inner calling. Likewise, each one of us has an inner calling, and we know it. Ultimately, we may be calling it by different names, but it is this inner calling which we hear only in the deep silence of us. And then we are guided to move on our path, and that is the purpose of our life. So the outside chaos, so-called chaos, then we begin to see the harmony in it. This is what I was feeling.
Wow.
That's very insightful. Thank you. I like the idea that there's harmony within the chaos, and that's the art of living, is finding that harmony. Pastor Billy, you look like you're ready to.
Yeah. Well, here I am, as you can see from the background. Here I am at the edge of the universe.
There you go.
I'm at the edge of the universe. I mean, that's where I live, right? And it is so good to be with you. I've missed being on MindPlore for the last month. I was in Gaza. I was in East Bakat. I was in a lot of different places. Great to be with Carla and Jeanne, you and Shivali. And the topic today, I just got to give a shout out to the topic today. It is one of my favorite topics because I'm a pastor and a humanitarian, and people assume that pastors can't stop talking, right? They bloviate, terminate, they pontificate. And let me just for the record say this. I love silence. And to our listeners today, the followers of Jesus Messiah, we actually have a history of being silent for 2,000 years. And of course, we go back to Abraham and Moses. And why do I say that I love silence? Is because I practice that. I practice silence. And as Carla and Shivali and Jeanne, you may know that I do a lot of fasting from food. And every week I fast, every week from 9 p.m. Saturday until 2 p.m. on Monday, meaning water only. And sometimes I do 10-day water only fast, sometimes 20, 30. And every year I do a 40-day water only fast because that's what the Lord Jesus did. Moses, I mean, there's many examples. And so what you're doing when you fast from food is you're being silent with food, if I could say that. And when you're fasting from food, water only, for 10, 20, 30, 40 days, you're so after like day 10, you're so weak, you can barely talk. And then, of course, when I go 40 days without food, just water, and under the supervision of a physician, which I am, and you're so weak you cannot talk. And so what do I say we have a 2,000-year history of silence? It's very interesting. Yesterday, on July the 4th, I was invited to attend the dedication and consecration of St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church. It was the only house of worship that was destroyed on 9/11 here in America. You know, everybody knows 9/11, 2001. And so it took them 21 years to rebuild this church because of there was just a lot of, you can imagine, there was a lot of delays. The point I want to make is I was there with some monks from Mount Athos in Greece. And the tradition within the followers of Jesus is that silence is golden. And these monks, they actually take a vow of silence during different times in their lives. And so for me, silence is golden. And we've been talking about listening to that inner voice, listening to our conscience. And so when I do my 10, 20, 30, 40-day water only fast, I practice a lot of silence. And I know, just to opine a little bit, and I'll be quiet. The world has always been loud. I just, people say, oh, we're living in chaos now because of all the wars. Hey, let me remind us, the world has always been loud. The world has always been chaotic. And my response to that is, that's why I gave my heart and life to Jesus Messiah 51 years ago, because I was living in a loud, chaotic, destructive world, my own life. And so now I enjoy silence. I love silence. And I love what Shivali said is that, we listen to our conscience. And most people avoid their conscience, right? Because probably they have what is known as a guilty conscience. And I always tell people, hey, we can be free from And I'll conclude by saying that we need to live outside the chaos. And when you live outside the chaos and live outside this noisy world, live outside this chaotic world, this crazy world, which has been crazy for a lot of years. And so nothing has changed. But when we live outside the noisy, chaotic, disruptive, destructive world, then we become infectious and we can draw other people in to our peace and our solemnity. Big word there. I'm not sure I know what it means, but, we bring people into peace. And, there's a great verse from the teachings of Jesus Messiah. He said, be slow to speak and quick to listen. And I always tell people, look at the mathematics God has given us: 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So we should listen twice as much as we talk. There you go. That's my pontificating for today. Back to you, Jeanne.
Kind of funny because I just spent the last couple of weeks, month or so, working with 5 and 6 year olds in summer school, helping them, be better prepared for school. And the one thing that I started off with is we're going to learn to listen. Not only are we going to learn to listen, we're going to learn to raise our hand before we speak, because that's de rigueur for classroom, right? But these kids hadn't been in a classroom for a long time, and now they needed a little extra help. So throughout the whole time, I really focused on how important it was to listen. And it's normal childhood behavior to want to be center of attention, be heard immediately, because we want to know exactly what you want to say in that moment. And so it was like a power struggle in a bit to get them to learn this new habit to sit and listen without getting frustrated, without getting angry. And so what I did was I made this cute little corner I called the quiet corner, and I had a lot of kids that had anxiety issues. And I said, when you feel overwhelmed and you feel very emotional, just say, I need to go to the quiet corner. And they went on their own, and they would go sit in the quiet corner for, however long they felt like it. And then they would go back to their desk. And it was a beautiful thing, because I know I was starting a habit, and it's a habit I forget about. When you start to feel the overwhelm of the world, the one thing I tell my friends when we start talking about, those kind of issues that can be, very fiery, and they get all worked up, I go, you know what? Turn off the TV. Just turn it off. Give yourself 2 days, no news, because we have to learn to be quiet and to listen. And I bring up the kids because I realized just how basic that skill is and how we don't often teach it when we really should for the younger kids. When they're little, teach that habit. And as adults, we have to kind of wrench ourselves out of life to sit quietly. We don't make it a daily routine. Some people do, and they're the calmer for it. And I can tell you, when I finally let go of my power struggle with silence, when I finally told myself I could sit for 5 minutes and meditate, it was life-changing. It was life-changing because my emotions were better regulated. My thought patterns were calmer. I was able to handle crises, which is one of the things I did in my business life. I was able to handle those crises with much more grace and aplomb. And better yet, I could go home to my son and actually hug him and mean it, and not be all fragmented because of what was going on with work. So that silence, even 5 minutes a day, makes a huge difference. And I would tell people, the exercise a brilliant woman told me to do was, every time I was driving and I hit a stop sign or a stoplight, take a deep breath, and then take 2 deep breaths, and get yourself up to 3 deep breaths in that tiny moment of time. And that's when I realized I can do this. And it's empowering, because the chaos that I see in the world is all about power struggle. You know, who's got the power over you? And the truth is, you have the power over you. You do. Only you do. You know, and we take that minute and listen to ourselves, listen to our inner strength, listen to our inner voice. That helps us take a step outside and actually influence the world a little bit. Because if I change, the people around me change. The people around me change. The people around them change.
Yes.
Hey, Carla, you're back?
I've been here.
I know that, but you know, you do all the technical stuff, and
Well, it's easier managed now that I have Restream, and I can do it on more pages now than I could before.
cool.
So I have been here. And let's remember, we want this to be a conversation and not just us talking. Now that I spoke probably more than 2 minutes. I want to bring in something about silence. We are always forgetting to listen. I see that on my English show. Sometimes I think it's the problem with the language barrier, but other times people forget to listen because you are ready to jump in and say what you need to say. And it's a hard thing to remember. It's sometimes takes many, many reminders to begin to be able to do that. The first time I ever experienced silence, real silence, was 7 days in 1974 at the beginning of the new year. I hope Pastor Billy will get back. And during that time, I was actually a teacher training course, and we were given the option either to talk or to be silent. And I chose the option to be silent. But as I was watching everyone being there, a lot of people just had trouble calming their mind down. And I'd like to know your thoughts on how do you calm your mind? Do you use meditation? Do you use breathing? I know that when I take a deep breath, it automatically slows down the mind. What do you do, Shivali, to slow down the mind?
Yes, Carla, I'm trained in clairvoyance. And so one of the basic technique which we were taught when I took it up in 2006, that's how I connect to Deepak Chopra also, because he's trained in the Silva method. We all know about Jose Silva method. So I also took my first training in clairvoyance in the Silva method. So they have these centering activities that they make us do. So I still practice that. And later on, I took my basic clairvoyance training also. And what I do is, like as Jeanne also pointed out, we are asked to concentrate on a breath, and I lower my brain frequency. So from beta, I go down to alpha, go down to theta. So it's a very deep level of meditation where your mind and body is completely relaxed. You're operating at the alpha level and even deeper than that. And that is when I do my healings also of myself and others. So deeply connecting with that inner core, as Jeanne was saying, it's all about lowering my brain frequency. Now in other systems, like any meditation also, the idea is the same, to lower the brain frequency. Because at beta, like right now we are talking at beta levels, the activity is of a different kind. So the moment you lower your brain frequency, you become more and more relaxed. And from that relaxed realm, you become more creative. you become more dynamic, and you can do wonderful things, not just for ourselves, but for others also. So I'm deeply grounded in this. So I try to spend a few minutes every day. And yes, when I'm at work and, due to some reason I could get agitated or whatever, that is the time I center. I do these deep breaths, taking those deep breaths. So we have a calm down exercise for this. But the idea is the same. This is what I do.
Okay, Jeanne?
I do something similar. I use that three deep breath, kind of almost like it's a mantra. It's like I just start taking deep breaths and saying that it's inside my head, focus on the breathing. It's time to calm down. When you are doing a deep breath down to your abdomen, not just, using all of your chambers in your lungs, not just up here, you actually cannot be in a stressed mode. You go into more of your brain goes more into the frontal lobe, which is more logical, versus the back part of your brain, which is we call the monkey mind, where you're in that fight, flight, or freeze moment. So when you start to take the deep breath, that helps physiologically to change. But while I'm doing that, I'm saying to myself, stay calm, listen, stay calm. And so I can get myself down. I don't know if I'm at the theta mode or that, because I've never tried that except for meditation. I know you have to get down to the beta. You go from alpha to beta to, is it theta? It's next. So I like to listen to meditations, and I also do it without anybody talking. But I know that when I get to that space from deep breathing and calming myself down, that there is a calmness that I relish. And it's in that space. Sometimes I'm not even aware if I'm hearing anything, but I know when I come out of it, when I bring myself back to consciousness, that I'm in a better space. And I can think more clearly, because that chaos, as I like to point out, has calmed down. To me, it's like throwing a pebble in a pond. You throw the pebble and everything gets all mucky and churned up and everything. But it takes time and effort to let that just sift down and have that clear thought again. So that's kind of what I think about, is clearing the pond, if you will. Pastor Billy, how do you go about centering yourself?
Yeah, well, I got so excited about talking about silence that I got overheated and my iPhone shut down. So anyway, I am back, and I'll be brief because I don't want to sermonize or patronize, because I know that this is a conversation. And my brief response is, this is why prayer was invented. And if all else fails, pray. And that's what I do. And that's what I encourage other people to do. So that's, it's really, it's a healer. Prayer is healing. It's healing physically. It's healing psychologically, physiologically, emotionally. It's the greatest healing power prayer is in the entire world.
It's funny you say that, because when I was working with teenagers, when I started this practice, too many years ago to count, I was just learning to meditate, and I was just kind of getting into it. So how when you just learn something, you want to tell everybody how great it is. Well, with kids, you don't get away with that. With kids, you just have to be real. And I was working with a teenage group, and they were like, why are you making us meditate? Why? And I finally, I don't know where the words came from, Pastor Billy, but I said, when we pray, we're asking for help. We're asking for whatever. We're having a conversation with God. So when we're praying, that's us talking. When you're meditating, that's us listening. And you have to do both. So tying in prayer is a perfect pairing with meditation, because that it's It's
Right.
when we get to listen. And that got the kids to sit back and actually want to learn how to quiet their mind.
Yeah. And I love the word reflection. And because people today are so busy. And of course, we all know that people find their self-worth from their busyness, right? They find, so hey, I tell people, stop being so busy, right? And they say, well, look at you, Pastor Billy, you're flying around the world and you're busy. I'm like, I'm really not busy. I move fast, but I'm not busy. And I want to take that time to pray and to reflect. And we miss so much when we don't pray and when we don't reflect. And meditation has been a part of the history of followers of Jesus Messiah for 2,000 years. I mean, reflection and prayer. It's great stuff. So there you go.
But
Carla, how about you?
I was just about to answer that.
Oh, good.
I've heard Sri Ravi Shankar, and I hope I get this right because I'm reversing everything in the past 2 days, say often when you meditate, you are listening. And when you are praying, you are asking. The silence within is so very important. And as we grow up, we're being told, don't do this, don't, I want you to learn to walk so I don't have to carry you around. And people are always throwing things at us that we don't learn to look inside and look and see what's happening. I know in the Art of Living Foundation, also with Transcendental Meditation, there are programs for kids as young as 5 to bring them back to who they are and what they're about. And we forget to teach kids this. We forget to teach kids human values. And because we have lost that understanding that we are valuable just as we are, we begin listening to everyone else say, well, do this, do that, and we forget to go inside and find out where we as individuals are and what we want to do. I've had many kids come to the kids show and say, well, I'm going to be an engineer. My parents expect me to be it. And I say, are you interested in what they're asking you to do just out of curiosity? And they say, no, but I need to listen to my parents. Yes, to a certain point. But then you also need to listen to who you are. And that's what meditation gives you. Shivali?
Two things I would like to say here. Earlier, Jeanne was mentioning about the chaotic world, and then Devlin said that this chaos has been there from the beginning of time, right? And that is why we have things like detoxification, this term which has been used. Like for me, if you ask me, I think it's almost more than 10 years, no television. I don't watch television. I don't read newspapers. It's almost 10 years. I have a smartphone, and the smartphone invariably will pop up with all kinds of information. So, but I feel that I have done a big thing in my life, like reading newspapers and not watching television at all. This has been my way of keeping myself away from this chaos to the best of my ability. And secondly, the power of prayer. The more we say about it, the more there is to be said. Yes, I strongly believe in the power of the prayers. And that is why I was reminded of the Indian system also, the Vedic system, where at the age of 5, the children are sent to the Gurukul system. The whole idea was about the values in their life, the life skills. and most importantly, the spiritual growth and the spiritual nourishment. And that is the basis of everything. God has created us. There's a purpose to our life, and we are here to fulfill that purpose. So I am a person who strongly believes in prayers. I can go and I have been into the church, I've been to temples. The kind of peace you get there when you are just connecting with the Lord. You're just sitting in the church and you are looking at the altar and you're just closing your eyes. What happens that time? You're meditating, you're praying, you're connecting with the divine. And I think that has really helped me to, deal with life better also, and made me a better human being also. So these are the thoughts which were coming to my mind as I was hearing all of you.
Hmm.
It's very powerful, Shivali. Thank you for sharing. Because we don't have to live in a chaotic world. We can choose. And that's the other skill that goes into this. You can choose to be silent. The quote that Carla and I were talking about yesterday started out with "Silence is the best response." And I was looking for, there's a million different quotes that use that, but many times people look at you when you're silent like you must not know what you want to say. And yet in reality, when you're silent, you're saying a lot. I use this experience. My kid was a difficult child in his teenage years. What kid isn't? Their job is to push boundaries and our job is to hold boundaries. And there was one particular time he and his friends did something and I was very, very upset. Angry would not even be a strong enough word, because I looked at him, I was going to start yelling and I just closed my mouth and I stared him down, and then I turned around and walked away. And I heard my son say, "You guys better go. She's really, really pissed. I've never seen her like this. This is really scary." And I remember getting a little smile on my face going, okay. I walked out back into another room and let him deal with stuff. He cleaned up the big mess. The kids went away and he's like, "Mom, don't do that again." I was like, "Do what?" He goes, "You were so mad you couldn't even speak." I went, "Exactly." I didn't have to say anything. He just knew. That's how powerful silence can be. It speaks volumes when we give ourselves time. But the other thing I wanted to point out about silence is that when something happens, oftentimes it's something really catastrophic, like the death of somebody or whatever the crisis of the moment is. I think some of the most powerful things we can do is just sit next to somebody quietly and just be. I mean, I don't know who said it, but I always like this saying about we're human beings, not human doings. It's a comment about how busy we keep ourselves, but just sitting next to somebody can be very uncomfortable because we're expected to speak. But you just put your hand on their hand and you go, and they know your essence is speaking in a different way to them. And I do this with my grandkids. I just sit with them while we're doing some activity because they just need to know what I'm saying to them is I'm your anchor. I'm here for you. And we need friends in our lives that do that for us as well. Just sit and be. It's very, very powerful.
If I may jump in this conversation, that's a beautiful thought. When I do a lot of grief counseling, I do a lot of funerals as a pastor, and you really, Jeanne, you're right. You don't have to say anything, because I call it the ministry of presence, the ministry of presence. You just have to be present with people. And it's difficult because I'll say this with apologies to Shivali, Americans always want to solve problems, right? And well, if you're at a funeral, you're not going to solve anything because you can't bring that person back from the dead, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to sit there, you're going to be silent. And that's where our physical, if I could use the word, our physical emanations are much more important than our verbal emanations, where you're there to hold a hand, to hug someone, to embrace them. You can tell people I love you, right? Okay, that'll work. But how about if you don't say anything, but you just embrace them, or you hold their hand, or you put your arm, appropriately so, put your arm around their shoulder. That's just a whole lot more than when you're silent, or excuse me, when you say to someone, I love you. And of course, coupled together, that's real power. And so reflection, prayer, silence, and all these things are so good. And I always say to folks, be careful what you say, because sometimes, and I learned this from my bride, Nancy, of 42 years. She said to me many years ago, hey, Pastor Billy, you don't have to speak everything that comes into your mind. And I've learned a lot from my philosopher wife. And because oftentimes when something comes to our mind, it comes out and it's really bad, right? So I like to say we need to put brakes on our thoughts. Put brakes on our thoughts. And that's where the beauty of silence really comes in. And I think Carla, Jeanne, and Shivali, we've all been talking about that. We've all been talking about. So for those that are listening in, I always have to put brakes on my thoughts. And I'll do that right now.
Or have a very fine filter, go to 0.05 micron filter.
But I don't think it's actually brakes on your thoughts, Pastor Billy. You can have your thoughts and you can say what you need to say. But sometimes, I know in my case, I may get so stuck on a certain thought that I continue to say it and say it and say it. And I have a friend who actually will stop talking to me when I do that, because it's like, why are we having this conversation? You keep saying the same thing over and over again in different words, and gets very annoyed with me. But I think it's more or less taking our thoughts, expressing them, but also using our ears to hear what the other person is saying. And sometimes you don't need to say, oh, everything's going to be okay. I have people who say that to me, and they say it over and over and over again. And I get to the point like, why am I talking to you? You're not giving me a solution. You're saying the same thing. We forget to use our ears, and our ears go not only to the world outside of us, but also to the world inside of us. So when we stop speaking, then we begin to listen and know what really is going on.
But keep in mind, Carla, that sometimes we speak to process our thoughts. And, that might be why we repeat the same thing over in different ways, because we're in the midst of processing. And an astute listener would say, oh, I see you're processing, but we don't always hear it. So we don't recognize it. But you're right, Pastor Billy. We tend to want to be in this society, in the American culture, we tend to want to fix problems. But what I've noticed, mostly as an adult, is we don't always know what problems we're trying to fix. And that becomes a problem in itself. I have a colleague who would say, oh yeah, let's spend $1 million on a new IT tool. We have no idea what we want it to do or if it can fix the problem, but we'll spend the money. which was his way of responding when everybody said, let's get this tool. It's new, it's cool. That's kind of the technology way of looking at things. You got to have the biggest, brightest, the best. But sometimes old school works, and I'll take it down to sea level here. When I walked into the class for my summer school session, I didn't have a TV or a monitor. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have anything that normally you would have in a classroom. And they were like, just teach. So I went to the University of Google, which is my favorite school, and I put in worksheets for kindergarten, and I printed up a couple of worksheets, and we did it old school way. The kids sat down with a pencil, and for the first 3 days until I got my equipment, we were doing the way that I was taught, which was so far back in the last century that people forget. So, so I sent a note home, you're going to see worksheets, take a look at them, help the kids know that this was a good thing. Because reading a book, I have a couple of Dr. Seuss books that I brought in, actually reading, not using YouTube to read a story, doing some old school kind of teaching methods made me remember just how simple life can be. We don't have to fix all the problems. Sometimes we have to process the problem and then go, oh, this is what I'm going to do. So Carla, you're right. When we listen and we spur the conversation, the person speaking comes up with their own solution.
Right. And you're right. We need to process it. And sometimes by processing also goes by listening. The two work hand in hand. And you're right. I mean, I know I repeat things all the time, probably way too much, and ask the same question over and over again. I'm not perfect.
Oh, really? I thought you were.
Then you don't know me.
When I just jump in here, want to hear Shivali's thoughts. When I was talking about putting a brake on our thoughts, I was thinking of negative thoughts. And I think those that are listening, are we always thinking, when we have negative thoughts, those are the thoughts I do not want to come out. And so I guess I was speaking to personally that when I, and think about arguments are what? They are negative thoughts, right? When we get into an argument with someone, we always think we're right and the other person's wrong. That's really the philosophical foundational basis of arguments. We're right, and guess what? You're wrong. And we go into finger pointing. So when I put brakes on my thoughts, those are the negative thoughts, and I should have clarified that. Shivali?
Well, there's nothing wrong with negative thoughts. They're there. You can have them, but how do you switch the negative to positive?
And right, and we don't want to use our negative thoughts to hurt someone or destroy anybody, because words have the power of blessing and the power of life, and they also have the power of cursing and the power of death. We can kill people with our words, metaphysically speaking.
Yes,
Well,
words have vibrations, obviously. Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes we just need
to add something to that, Shivali. Yes, I agree. But do you want to add something to that?
See, I was listening to Reverend and to Jeanne. That thing which I said right in the beginning, that silence is good, all that is fine, but the action part, like Jeanne said, holding someone's hand, just being there, your very presence makes the difference. You don't even say anything. And the next thing is like hugging someone. That's action. That's a kind of action where you move forward. Because we are, as human beings, it's okay. I understand that someone is being empathetic, but sometimes you need to show that love also. I love someone, I have to show my love also. So that's why this hugging and kind of just holding hands, or even simple words like I understand, I know, yes. These are affirmations actually. And this makes place, I mean, the world a better place. And yes, negative thoughts that we are speaking of, that's bound to be there, and the whole point is that we know it's a negative thought and we can replace it with a positive thought. It's an ongoing process actually. So I understood what Reverend was saying, that yes, there are times when we tend to defocus, or there are some thoughts coming from our past, or whatever is happening around us. So you have to kind of ignore it, and if you cannot ignore it, at least replace it. That is why the concept is there, like when you sleep at night, before you go to sleep, that is why we say the prayers also. It's like mental house cleansing. All that has taken place during the day, it's like a mental house cleansing you're doing. You're connecting with the divine, and it's like a mental house cleaning you're doing, so that you go to sleep peacefully. So a lot of things are there. And today's topic is really very deep. So a lot of thoughts are coming to me today. Thank you so much, Carla, for this beautiful topic today.
Yes.
You're welcome. Pastor Billy, you're nodding your head.
Yeah. I'm going to be more silent. I mean, when we have these conversations, I learn so much from people that are smarter than me, like Shivali, Jeanne, and Carla. And I think that's the other side of silence. Silence is really multifaceted, right? I think that's part of our conversation we've been having today. Silence is multifaceted. And so I'm just going to listen to my wife more, and listen to my kids. And isn't it interesting that when, I'm in a 3-generational family, I think I listen to my grandkids the most. Why? Because we want to show them that we're interested in them, that we're interested in what they have to say. And that's the other multifaceted side of silence. When we are silent, we are saying to the person speaking, you know what? You've got a lot to say, and I really appreciate you saying it, and I'm going to listen to you. So I'm going to be quiet and silent and listen to the three of you.
Well, if you're doing that, you're also taking away from the position you have here as a participant. I mean, I'm happy you are doing this, but I also want you to be a part of the discussion, because we learn from each other. Not one person knows more than anyone else, but every person has their own perspective. And every word that we speak may have different meanings to anyone we're speaking to. So if you go silent, you're not allowing us to learn from you. And that goes for everyone.
I agree. You're right. It's a conversation. You're right.
I mean, I do these interviews for Rehan's Allahwala.
Allahwala.
That world of connections, but I think I only call it Rehan's. No, I do call it Rehan Allahwala's world of connections. And in the beginning, it was a conversation in my mind. I said, you want to talk to the person? And Rehan said, no, not really, because you need to listen and learn and let people learn from that person. So I shut my mouth a lot when I do this, so I can allow the other person to speak and to learn from that person. But when I do MindPlore, that's another thing, because we're here exploring each other's mind and each other's way of thinking. Jeanne, I just forgot the name of the show because basically I have it already typed in and I don't say it. I say it once in the beginning of the show and that's it. So yeah, it's Rehan Allahwala's World of Connection. It didn't sound right to me when I began talking.
Oh, it's to be understood, because on top of it, the world being chaotic, we have more information thrown at us per minute than ever. So we get overwhelmed with information. And I like to joke with my friends and say that memory is full and there's no more plug-in slots in here. So we have to filter through, it kind of brings me back to my 386 days when Windows wasn't even 95 yet. It takes a while to process. And that's also part of why listening or silence is important, because that helps us process. We are the most supercomputer in the world, each one of us, and we do need processing time. But one of the things I'd like to mention, Pastor Billy, is listen to the grandkids carefully. We get wisdom and insight from some of the most innocent little creatures. 4 and 5-year-olds can ask some really great questions that make us go, I never thought about it that way. And that's extremely valuable. And we should honor that, just as we need to honor our elders and learn from their experiences.
Yeah. And I was raised in a generation, great thought and great thoughts from all of you. I was raised in a generation. I always remember we're talking back in the day, children should be seen, but not heard. And so I want to break that chain, and I want to listen to my kids and my grandkids. Why? Well, because I find this funny. There's so much in life that's funny and joyful. But kids are a reflection. When we have children, they're a reflection of us, right? I mean, they were in our home for what? 17, 18, 19, 20 years. And what were they doing? They were listening to their parents, their mom and their dad. So it's so funny to me that my kids repeat. I mean, they're all in their 20s and 30s. Our oldest daughter is 40. They say back to me things that I said to them 30 years ago, like when they had to do their homework, our 5 kids, and I used to say, look, you got to do your homework, because that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. So the Nietzsche line, the Friedrich Nietzsche line, which he famously said, that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. So now when I share them a story about me doing humanitarian work overseas, they'll say, well, okay, Dad, you had to take a 12-hour train ride in Ukraine to get to Kyiv, the capital, to help people. And then they'll say, but that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. And I just laugh and I say, where did you hear that from? So it's great when we can listen to our kids. We learn a lot.
I don't think people realize that children have as much wisdom as adults, and that we forget what is in there. What's in their heads is very worthwhile, because when they come to us, they come from that source of thought. And then we ruin it by saying, don't do that. Don't do that. Be this, be that. It may not be what the child wants to be. Jeanne, you wanted to say something?
Well, that's a good point, because when a child says something to me, it's unfiltered. It's their truth in that moment. And when they ask me why, they really force me to think about why I'm saying something. So my grandson's in the one of them is in that phase where it's like, why? And you want to go, because I said so, which is exactly what my parents would have said. So as I'm sitting around the dinner table with my son and his kids, And he goes off, the little one goes off with why, and I hear my son say, because I said so. I just smile and I look at him and I go, have you looked in the mirror yet? Yeah. But what the kid's doing is he's making us think through why we're saying something, because sometimes it's just a knee-jerk reaction. It's just a shoot from the hip kind of response, that immediate thing without taking a breath. And when we think about it, sometimes the reason we do things has nothing to do with who we are. It's just that we were taught this way. It's the right thing to do or something like that. But when he's asking me why, I have to go through this whole process of, why did I choose to say that? Why am I doing this? What's going? And I have to reflect in that moment quickly to be able to respond to my grandson. So it makes me clarify where I'm coming from. And that's actually an important point to make. It's another reason why we need to balance and be able to think clearly. Another thing that I just want to add is, I was talking to a 6th grade teacher just recently, and he said he realized that his students didn't want to think. And I was taken aback, and instead of going, why, I actually said, why do you say that? Because I'd like to understand. And he said in his class, they were just saying, show me how to do it. You do it for me. They didn't want to go through the process of learning that you take the numerator and you divide it by the denominator, and so whatever it was they were doing in fractions. And getting them to be critical thinkers is something we have to start much younger than 6th grade, was his point. But listening to kids is step one, and allowing them to become those critical thinkers. So by the time they're 11 or 12, they've already learned some bad habits. And it's up to us to unlearn our own bad habits so that we can teach better habits. And so if we can all learn to sit in silence, even for 2 minutes, the time of a commercial break on a PBS station, just take that time. Okay, Pastor Billy, you're laughing, but it's almost 5 minutes in commercial TV now.
I know.
But just 2 minutes of silence, just to catch yourself, recenter yourself, and make sure you're grounded in reality. That, like I said earlier, that changes who I am in the world, and then I can influence others to change because I'm calm and centered. Then they can go, I want to do that too, and become calm and centered. And the more we can do that, the more we can change the world for the better. It really is how you show up. And silence is a great motivator to show up centered and solidly grounded.
There's a thing about opposites are complementary. And when you realize that opposites are complementary, you begin to understand that there is something that about being silent, but also appreciating what others say. And when we stay silent, we tend to stay more focused. We do need to close, and I just want to go around and give everyone a chance to say their final thoughts briefly, please. Shivali.
Just what Jeanne was pointing out about children, that children are silent observers. And I was reminded of my own childhood. I often got punished for asking too many questions. I always, like as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, you speak to my mother, you say she was always asking, who is God? I want to see God. How does the rain form? Too many questions. And my father used to get fed up with me at times. And he would scold me for this. And I had decided that tomorrow when I have children, I will never scold them. Children are silent observers. They are actually, divinity in a very miniature form, actually. Pure, absolute purest. So silence, the topic that we took up today, yes, it's about connecting with your inner self. For me, it's all about connecting with your inner divine self and then serving the purpose of your life. And the only purpose of a life is serving God. We have to be the channel for doing so. This is what I want to say.
Okay. Jeannie.
I want to go back to the quote from Rumi, listen to silence. It has so much to say, which, you know, makes us become active. You know, if I really take that to heart, you become active in seeking out silence and quieting your mind so that you can hear. I like the idea of staying centered and grounded, and that silence is the tool to help you get there and maintain it throughout the day, no matter what is thrown at you. I still remember being a 4 and 5-year-old being taught in movement to bend like the willow, to, you know, just flow like the willow. You know, and that's what I say to everybody. You know, you need to take a deep breath and just kind of go. The willow doesn't break; it just goes with the wind. And the silence helps us do that.
Pastor Boy.
Yeah, embrace silence, study silence, enjoy silence, love silence, be slow to speak and quick to listen. Thanks, Carla, for having us on today.
And we all need to learn to do this. It takes time, but it happens. I want to thank everyone, Shivali, Jeanne, Pastor Billy, for being here today. And those who watch, we had some very interesting comments in the comments. I just happened to catch it now. And it's true, silence is important. Remember this song in the 60s, The Sounds of Silence. When we listen to silence, we become closer to ourselves. We will be back on Thursday with another wonderful group of people talking about silence. And for now, we are going to go. See you later. Let's wave goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.